Recording in progress.
Okay. What we're going to do is have Renee introduce how this works, pause for your questions and discussion, and then Renee is going to take us into at least two examples of new initiatives that are taking the whole question of climate action and verifying the action that people take and measuring it and funding it, and how that might happen going forward too. So a really warm welcome to everybody and a special thanks to Renee. I'll hand over to you. As Renee speaks, please do write in chat any questions that you have. I'll keep an eye on those and we'll bring those together in those two, during the two pauses that we have for questions and discussion. Take it away, Renee.
Kia ora koutou katoa. Thank you, Trish, for the warm welcome. And yeah, thanks for having me along tonight to share. Thanks for those who are tuning in. I see a few familiar names here. Kia ora, Gavin. And great to know that this is a recorded resource as well. I've been watching some of the other webinars that our climate declaration has online. So I guess I will share my screen so you can see as I talk through my slide deck. Just let me know if that's working. Yeah, looks good. Okay. Ka pai. So, ko waia hau, ko Renee Raroa tōku ingoa, ko hikurangi te maunga, ko waiapu te awa, ko Ngāti Porou te iwi, ko te whanua taki moana, te hapu, ko ohine waiapu te marae, no Rangitukia ahau. Kia ora everyone, my name's Renee, and as Trish said, I am going to share with you a bit of the journey that we've been on in the last year out here in the Tairāwhiti region. And in particular, I wanted to share more about the East Coast Exchange and what that is enabling. It's a community by for community by community platform. And I'm really open to any questions that you might have as this pops up. So I'm used to taking all sorts of questions in. So yeah, don't be shy with the questions. We'll break halfway through so I can answer some of those. And then we'll have another go at questions at the end as well. So firstly, yeah, I want to acknowledge that the Jeanette Fitzsimmons Climate Action Grants Fund and the collaboration that we've enjoyed together in last year in the East Coast Exchange. So this image that you're seeing here, I think you can see an image of a coastline. This is the whenua that I grew up in, Te Kautuku. It's almost as far east as you can get. The point that you're looking at in the left-hand corner, just around that bend, is the East Cape Lighthouse. So yeah, I'm very privileged to have grown up on our whenua, where we've had ancestral occupancy for as long back as the whenua had people. And our whānau is still the land managers of that whenua. And it's gone through all sorts of changes over the years as well. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about our journey to restore and regenerate the land there, and how the East Coast Exchange that we're building and the underlying infrastructure for that is helping us in that journey. So I've written a couple of notes because I want to make sure I get all my points across. Let me move to the next screen. Okay, so this might look a little bit chaotic, but just so you know kind of my background and where I come from. I grew up on the whenua Māori that you have just seen, Te Kautuku on the far east coast. I then moved to Gizzy for some schooling and went to do my studies down at Otago University. Dunedin's the only other place that I've ever lived in the world, and it was a beautiful, beautiful time. But what I have noticed as I kind of reflected on my journey as a person is that I think perhaps in some part due to the connection that I was able to enjoy to nature growing up, that's always been a theme throughout my life. And so even in my education space, I studied neuroscience, but it was the Indigenous studies and psychology that really did it for me. After university, I stayed down in Dunedin to run, I think, one of New Zealand's first plant-based cafes. So some climate action there for those of you who have been following and know all about the impacts of plant-based diet on our environment. I've been vegan myself for over 20 years now, so that's one of the contributions that I guess I'm making personally. Facilitation. So after my time down in Dunedin, I moved back home to Gisborne, to Tairāwhiti. I don't know if there's anyone on this call who lives in a kind of provincial town, but you start to get that call to come home, especially when your region has needs and there's work to be done. So that was definitely part of my journey. I came home and got into teaching. So that part of my journey has been as a maths and science teacher. And what I really loved about that was the ability to do localized curriculum, local knowledge building, and take the kids out of the classroom and kind of teach them that love of maths and science, and what it can do in our environment. I moved into technology in a tech for good space and facilitated some learning there. And I've been really heavily involved in our local kind of impact scene as well. So whilst the timeline, when you're younger, it kind of went from this to this to this. On the right-hand side of the screen, what my life looks like now is more of a cluster of all sorts of things. So I'm the establishment director of the East Coast Exchange, which I'm going to fill you in on, and that's existed just in the last year. The 5 years prior to that, I was part, or I still am part of Tōhā Network, which is building new nature markets for trusted data and the data infrastructure that goes with that. We also co-founded the Exchange Cafe, which is a platform that supports regional climate conversations. So by the region, for the region. We hold interviews. We partner with some studios and get recordings of those interviews and make sure that the conversations we're having can go far and wide across the region. Te Weu Charitable Trust, you'll see on there as well, was founded just a year and a bit ago. I'm the chairperson for that charitable trust, which has the purpose of enabling climate community-led research for our region. So another important part of the kind of regional puzzle is to not just have the research done to us around climate, but to be part of that story. I've put Taikea Impact House in there as well. So this is a deep connection with our community to ensure that there's spaces and places for everyone in the community to go to innovate and work on problems together. And Manu Tukutuku, which is a regional digital strategy group. So you'll see throughout my presentation, there's an overlap between tech and environment. That's a bit of a theme for me. And it's really about using the technologies and understandings and the tools that we have for good. Oh, all right. What else did I want to say about that? Yeah. Oh, the one thing that I haven't mentioned that's in this photo is the coloured little image there. You might recognise it from the previous slide. It's an outline of the whenua at Te Kautuku, and that just reminds me that actually everything comes back to place and land. Okay, so in terms of the East Coast Exchange, where it all began was actually, where it had its genesis was in the days following Cyclone Gabrielle. So I thought we could do a wee exercise here to take ourselves back. I'm going to assume we were all in New Zealand at that time, but if you weren't, you may have been hearing stories of what was happening at that time. And if you could just reflect back for a moment on what you were doing. Were you in a place that was really affected? Were you hearing about what was happening? Were you thinking, oh, is this due to climate impacts? Are communities ready? Yeah, I'd like us to take ourselves back to that moment, if you can, just over a year ago. And just in the chat, if you're handy to the computer, or just in your mind, if you'd rather, share with us in chat some of the feelings you were feeling, things you were thinking, some of the images that really stood out to you. And then I'll kind of use those to draw on as we go through the next bit. And Trish will monitor those for me as well. So in that moment for us out in Tairāwhiti, and I know there are a few people on here from the region, so I've got to acknowledge you guys as well. Also our Hawke's Bay whānau and ones up north too. So, you know, I know we weren't the only ones impacted, but what we were experiencing in the days following was like this image, complete isolation and being cut off from each other. And, you know, like as a fairly small and tight-knit community, the thing that we do have is our togetherness. So when all of a sudden you don't know what people are doing, if everyone's safe, you know, who's experiencing the worst of it, and you have no means of contacting anyone, it can be really scary. Right across the region, when we were cut off, all of our roads were cut off, our bridges, like I could no longer get home to Te Kautuku anymore. All of our bridges had been wiped out. The water pipes were, you know, gone. Our all communication lines were down. Power was out. We really had to revert back to just kind of going, what do I have with me as a person right now, and how can I contribute? And so for us in the Toha team at the time, we had been in the region for 5 years, building and designing our technology, which was to capture trusted data about the environment. So we thought, what can we do with our skill set and our time that could contribute to the region? What we landed on before our computers were back online and things like that was starting to take a record of all of the contributions that community members were taking for their environment and for their community. And so in the early days, that meant running around with clipboards, noting down what was happening, taking photos for future verification of those activities. Because what we know in a disaster situation is that so many members of the community, you know, they jump in and they start to take action on super limited resources. And often when resource and support does drop, it doesn't actually acknowledge any of that. And it doesn't filter down to the spaces that did a lot of the work to enable them to actually prepare for next time or to continue to do the good work that they do. You know, people are just doing that and scraping by. So we wanted to make sure that there was a record of activities. And that meant in the early days, Post-its and clipboards. But once we got back online and could kind of use our technology for good, we started to form a digital record with verification of a range of activities that had gone on across the Tairāwhiti community in that time. Okay, so this is just like a tiny snapshot of the early days, the type of activities that we were recording. People were bringing in goods from out of town, you know, organizing planes to fly in, things to be distributed around the region, all of the volunteering, which is great. Like people didn't expect any kind of return for these actions, but we wanted to make sure we could capture kind of the full, you know, a fulsome image And then if people did need resource, they could use that record to draw down on it. We ourselves, well, that's me on the back of the truck in the bottom right-hand corner, and my nieces and nephews handing out oranges, because we didn't know how much or when things would open back up and what our food supply would be like. And at a time like that, the main thing is kind of to keep providing hope to the community that, you know, good things are happening. And so cars lined up a lot. This is on the main street. I don't know how health and safety legit this was, but cars lined up and we handed out bags of oranges, that kind of thing. And then these guys in the big picture here, you can see the brokenness of the road beside them. Yeah, there were so many hands on the ground just doing cleanup activities and making sure that people were as safe as possible, really. So what do we intend to kind of do with that record? Well, the East Coast Exchange, what it actually has turned into and is a verifiable record of environmental action. So every line of action that people input, and that anyone can input their activities, has a piece of proof that goes with it, whether that's a photograph or an invoice, or some other kind of proof that shows that that action did happen and that we can trust it. It's all about the trust in that data. So we verify every single action that goes on the record so that it can be trusted as a way to facilitate funding flow all the way to the front line, because we know that often funds can not reach certain sectors of the community because of all of the forms and things like that have to go on with it, or they might get bottlenecked in certain pockets. But the idea here was to enable that flow all the way to the front line of the community taking action. I'm going to give you a bit of a walkthrough of the East Coast Exchange, a live walkthrough. So bear with me for this. It's at eastcoastexchange.nz, but yeah, as I said, it's an open record. What it is now, it's moving beyond. You'll see when I take you on the walkthrough that it's moving beyond just coordinating resources in that recovery space into supporting a vision of regional regeneration. So this is where we start to expand on the type of actions that can be recorded here. It's distributing funds directly to the people on the ground taking action. And in the second part of the webinar, I'll talk to you about how we're also working with tōhā's infrastructure to develop claims or proof of actions and outcomes that can unlock new revenue streams for some of our land blocks, farms and people, and bringing forward a kind of a pipeline of work, and that's waiting in the wings to be activated. Okay, now is this going to work? I'll just reshare my screen with that link. And Trish, call out if there's anything that you want to interrupt me with, or if you want me to pause on anything.
People are in chat, just a few people are just trying to remind themselves about how bad, yeah, and worse than Cyclone Gabrielle and so on. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Okay. So you can see my screen here, right? The East Coast Exchange screen. All right. So this is the platform essentially, and it's a two-sided platform. So on one side, you can record your actions. So if you're on the ground, you're taking action, you can record it here. And on the other side, you can fund action. So essentially just a marketplace for getting funds to the activities that are going on.
What's that?
So,
When?
You're just leaving then here.
it's as easy as this.
That's not weird. I didn't hear her. Of course I didn't. I didn't hear her. Bloody hell.
Excuse me, there's some sound coming through. Could everybody just mute, please?
Oh, fuck's sake, Tanya. Shut up.
Oh, I think the host might be able to mute people.
Oh, host. Yeah. So Jack, could you?
Oh, thank you.
mute?
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks.
So as if you're coming in to record your action, it's as easy as going, I've taken action. And at the moment, these are the types of things that we are recording. You know, we did all of the emergency supplies, that type of thing. Then as the community started to realize they were going to need to save water, we brought forward actions around sharing water and installing water collection. As we needed to kind of do the clear up and the clean up, it was pasture recovery and silt and slash. And now as we're starting to think about moving out of that response and recovery phase and getting into the kind of how are we better prepared for next time and our broader climate actions, we've got things like pest control and planting new native plants, supporting community wellbeing. And the idea with this list is that it's not a complete list. You can always go other and you can record something that you believe is valuable to your community. But eventually we want our community to be able to propose new new items in here, and then to have some kind of voting process or decision making over what is valued in the East Coast Exchange, kind of what you're able to take action on. So it's as simple as that. You do the work, you record it, you get it added to the record, you provide a piece of verification evidence, and you self-assign points or a value to it. So we have contribution points, we call them, where you're self-assigning points equivalent to the New Zealand dollar. And then what you can do if you're seeking resource and seeking funds is you can then say that you want to draw down on those points. So over the course of the year, we've had 3,392,000 plus action points in terms of NZD equivalent recorded by the community. Just over $200,000 of funds have been distributed to those who sought to seek funds for their points. There's still some action points that are seeking funding. Over 900,000 are still seeking funding, and we've got a small kitty of funds still available. But our intention is to get the funds out as soon as they come in, and we put 100% of funds that come in via this and back out, straight out into the community. So this is an example of the type of things that people are recording. There's still records going on. You know, this one's just from this month, a few days ago. And where you see donated to the community, these are people who want to support the record, but aren't necessarily looking to draw down on any funds. Whereas this one here, seeking funds, they're looking to get some funds allocated. And I know this one, Women's Native Tree Project Trust, they do all sorts of amazing things in the community. And so it provides another mechanism for them to seek some funds for that. And you can see this record here by Slash for Cash was funded via the Rangitukia Climate Action Pool, which I'm going to tell you more about as well. So on the other side, you know, you can record action if you're taking action, and if you're a funder and you want to see your impact dollars get to the front line, you can fund actions. And in the platform, when you click any actions, it means that the funds that you drop in are going to go to the earliest record that hasn't yet been funded, that's seeking funds, that's been verified. And so we just make direct payments out to those records. Or you can choose, if you need to, target a specific action type. If you're looking to direct your funds at one of these tagged funding pools, then you can click and have those funds go to projects that satisfy that criteria. And when Trish came across this, I can't remember exactly how it happened, but I remember we had a conversation about, so this Rangitukia Climate Action Pool wasn't on here. There was emergency response and native reforestation, but the Jean Fitzsimmons Fund wanted to fund Rangatahi Climate Action. And so we actually designed a funding pool to enable them to fund that type of activity. We collaboratively kind of came up with some parameters, I guess, around that funding pool, and then we put funds in there, and others have also, by having this pool available, others have also deposited into the Rangatahi Climate Action Fund, and all of the funds that had come into there have been distributed out to the rangatahi on the record who have been taking climate action. Another way to view this, so that you kind of get a feel for all of the various activities going on, is via our impact map. So on the impact map here, each of these numbers, each circle shows an activity taken for climate and recorded on the record. So that one here, for example, was the Ruatoria community response. They donated these points, but they have given a description of the actions that they're taken there. You can see here, I know some of these ones because they're close to my whenua. These here repaired some fencing after an extreme weather event, and they're still seeking some funding for that. They've described it, it's been verified, so they must have added a photo. You can query other people's actions, or you can verify them as well. If you know something to be true, you can help with our verification of that. And the other thing we can do is to overlay different public data sets. So where we were wanting to show, for example, the Cyclone Gabrielle satellite imagery, you can then see when you start to overlay different data sets, there was deposited silt here. These ones here that said that they were cleaning up some silt, well, it looks like to be in the right place, so you can kind of get that other like level of trusted data and information going on. You can also see future projects in this map view, which is quite exciting because you can start to get a sense of the type of thing that can come when more funds drop into the system. Oh, okay. I'll stop sharing there because there's a slide that I want to show you that talks to the rangatahi funding pool. Oops. Cool. Can you see that slide again?
Yep.
Yeah, so these three images here are the three projects that were funded via the Climate Action Grant. On the left here, this is Te Wairotu, an amazing young person who lives in Uawa, Tolaga Bay, experienced a lot of the impacts of the cyclone. She's a surfer as well, and she's done a number of climate actions, but for example, she got together like a workshop where they collected some of the slash and started to use it for various purposes. She's also been an advocate using her platform as a young Māori surfer to spread the word about these things. Her dad is a drone, like flies a drone over to show some of the imagery. But yeah, an amazing young person who, had it not been for the ease and the way of accessing these funds, probably would never have sought to get any additional resource back. And it's not that she needed it for the action she's taken, but what it did is it enabled her to take future actions and to run more workshops and gatherings with her fellow peers. On the right-hand corner up here, this is the Slash for Cash crew. And so they've developed a biochar product using slash so that the community can, start to do something with the waste that exists all around them and create a beneficial product from that. Their biochars being used in all sorts of applications, gardens, cleanup, waterway cleanups, and the Rangatahi Action Fund went to this rangatahi, the two ones that are crouched down there, who are in Wairoa, to set up their own Wairoa branch of the Slash for Cash team. And actually what the Slash for Cash team said to us is that that funding piece enabled them to draw other funders in, because they had a bit of a start. So it can be an enabling thing as well. And then the group on the bottom right hand corner are some of the Tairāwhiti Enviro Schools climate leaders, creating awareness. I think this is a picture from the march last Friday. But yeah, the resource that has reached these rangatahi, they don't just kind of pocket it for other things. They're really dedicated to continuing to do more, and so it's enabled them to go out and do that in their communities. So as a summary, like I said before, over 3 million New Zealand dollars worth of contributions have come through the exchange, and some more examples of the stories that are happening there. Whenua at the time, they provided Starlinks, so they managed to get Starlinks into the community and provided them out. So they sought some resource for that. Sam the Trap Man, he did an amazing job at coordinating a whole lot of cleanup effort around the Waimata Valley. There was installation of new water and collection, and then native planting and stretching into that kind of regeneration space is the next steps. So we've got that place-based action of activities happening. We've distributed, 200 odd thousand to the frontline efforts through our verified record. But as you can tell, the funding flow, when we're working kind of just in the philanthropic and funding space as a new platform, it can't keep up with the amount of work that is being done and that needs to be done. And so in the second half of our chat, I'm going to fill you in on how we're solving for that problem by integrating with the Toha data platform. But yeah, I can take any questions that have come up, Trish, at this time.
Yeah. Kia ora, Renee. Oh, it is amazing to see the amount of local action that goes on in the variety. Just getting your head around how this new platform works. Feel free to ask Renee any questions on this. Either put your hand up or write it in chat and I'll pick it up. Jack's got one. No, is that, I can't see whether that's Jack.
It's Joanna.
Joanna, sorry, you had your thanks. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm bowled over, Renee. I'm just amazed at the system that you created, and I have a couple of questions. One has to do with the impact of having payment available for work voluntarily given, and the payment is available to some and not others, and whether that affects the inner motivation of people doing the work, and whether it creates any disgruntlement for people who might have hoped to be paid but weren't. That's one bit of question. The second is quite different.
Can we just start with that one, Joanne?
Okay.
Hold your second one.
Okay.
Yeah, great. And I'll come back to you for the second. And so just to make sure I was clear, where some people have chosen to be paid and others haven't, it's always at the choice of the person who's listed their action. So I will do a thing, plant a tree, for example, list my action, have that verified that it did happen. And I can say, hey, I just did that and I just want it to be on the record, but I'm going to donate that back to the community. I'm not going to take any resource for it. So that's my choice. Or I can say, hey, I'm seeking some funds for that. When funds drop in and I'm next on the list, I'll get the option of being paid out. And then in response to communities' feedback, we also added a third option, was to say some people want to let, as the funds drop in, other people get their funding first, but at some point in the future, they might want to draw down, you know, something might happen or they've got a project in mind. And so there's an option also to lock your points so that the funding can pass you by in the list, but still be available at a later date as the funding pool fills up. Now, some of the tension that we did experience is because there's limited funds, you know, we're just kind of using what we can draw in, that people might put a record up, they might say, hey, I'm seeking funding for this, and we might never get to them down the list. Well, we hope that over time, you know, this starts to fill up and then the funds flow a bit easier, but for a while they might not get paid out because we haven't gotten to them down the list. There's still some people seeking funds. It's always our intention to make sure that the communications around that was that this is a thing we're trialing. It's a voluntary thing. The listing itself shouldn't be so onerous that you know, you feel like, oh, I've done all this work to list what I did and I'm not going to get rewarded for it. So yeah, it was just a matter of comms, really. But another point that I will make is, in the voluntary kind of space, in the beginning, some people were kind of like, oh, but are we kind of saying to volunteer, you know, volunteer spirit is amazing. And actually Tairāwhiti region has one of the highest volunteer rates per capita in the country. Are we saying that we should only be volunteering if we're going to get a reward? Absolutely not. What we're trying to show is that kind of collective volunteer space, show that up, show the value that sits in community around that, and then offer people pathways for resource if they need it. Does that kind of answer your question, or have I missed a bit?
No, you've answered it very, very well. Thank you, Renee. And yeah, I guess it's just a dimension of what you do that would be interesting to keep an eye on, the impact on the volunteer spirit.
Yes.
Whether it had, I mean, I think there are many reasons to think it would have a really positive impact, in that the work is recorded, people appreciate it, they know what you've done, which would encourage people to, in fact, points are assigned to it, dollar value is assigned to what you've done, which is kind of rewarding in itself. But then there is that factor that you know, the research that shows paying people for things that they would have done voluntarily suppresses the volunteer spirit. So I guess it's just really interesting to keep an eye on that dimension.
Yeah.
Trish, is it all right if I ask the other question, or are there other people?
Go right ahead, Joanne. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
The other question I have is, I'm just enormously impressed by the system that you created kind of instantaneously on the spot. And has there been much dissemination of it, Renee? Have other regions asked you for an outline, a summary of this, so that they can adopt it into their adaptation plans for adverse events? I mean, my own region of Tasman is in the middle of working on adaptation plans, and it does seem to me that we're going to be mentioning what you've done and asking about adopting some of that into our own preparatory adaptation plans. So how much have you been asked to spread what you've done?
Yeah, sure. Well, the answer to that lies in where the East Coast Exchange was and how it was enabled to kind of come into existence, and that's through the incubating of it in the Toha network. So the reason that it could come into existence was because we had the Toha network, and then it stood the East Coast Exchange up. So the intention is actually that the East Coast Exchange is a regional example of Toha Network's technology and capabilities, and that can be replicated as you said, there's transferable understandings across different communities. Of course, every community will have, different focuses and different pieces that you'd need to work with and figure out, what works exactly for your community and go back and forth on that as we have in this. But it can, like you said, it can provide an example, a blueprint to other regions. I chatted yesterday with Reconnecting Northland and the amazing work that they're doing up there. We've been, chatting with a number of communities who are interested in a similar type model. So the intention very much from our region is to go, hey, this is what we've learnt from using the platform in this way, and how might other regions do it. Toha Network has also been looking at how it might work across industry as well. So not a regional example, but a industry example. So for example, Calm the Farm is one of the first trial ventures that the Toha Network has had in the regenerative dairy space. So yeah, very much applicable to other regions as well. And yeah, definitely reach out, or happy to have further chats or refer you on to those in the team who are supporting some other regions to think about this type of model for them.
Brilliant, Renee. Marvellous work.
I've got Maggie Jean and kia ora, Maggie, and then Bruce with hands up for questions. Okay.
Great. Hi, Maggie.
Maggie Jean?
Yeah. Just trying to get my video going as well. It's not wanting, the video's not wanting to turn on.
There, you're there, you're there.
We got there, we'll get. Yeah, just blown away by what you're doing. That's very, very exciting. And one of my questions, I'll try to just have one, is I'm fascinated in the bird's eye view that you have of the wider picture by this database, and wondering how you're using that to encourage how much the community and their initiatives is able to see that picture, and how does that enable people to join things up within the region of thinking, obviously you were physically isolated so much through your cyclone, so the localism in place sounds like an incredibly important part of it. But I'm just wondering whether across the region, that the East Coast area that you're covering, how much that's got people putting heads together and bouncing off shared vision around how you could join things up.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I wonder as well, to some extent, because I would like to think that map in particular, and the visibility to the actions, and even the who is doing and taking the actions, has sparked collaboration or conversations for groups that I might not even be aware of. But because we've been, it's our community, and we're kind of embedded in the in a lot of the regional conversations and strategies, what we do know is that bringing visibility across the region has been really important. And one example that I can think of is the Ngāhere network. So the Ngāhere network has formed, and you can see in our future projects each of the nodes of that network. And what they've formed as is a collection of backyard, small, like tiny through to larger scale native nurseries. And because they're able to kind of see each other and collectivize and then share data across, they can then make their backyard nurseries viable. And so that's kind of one example of how bringing visibility across the community has kind of enabled that to happen. I think another example is a good friend of ours who runs soil health workshops is running a workshop up in Ruatoria, and we're able to go, here's the network of people who are doing things in that realm on the ground. You can filter for various tags, and so he can kind of reach out, or he can see how many people in what area might be interested in doing his soil workshop. He offers as a free workshop through the EIT. So I think there's all sorts of potential ways that I can see if we had more time in the day that we could kind of dig into a few more layers of that. But there's hopefully things that are happening that we might not even be aware of in the East Coast Exchange. And I should say the East Coast Exchange team is amazing. It's definitely not just me, but I've been the voice for it. But yeah, we've got a great team, including people, including ones from the Toha team that can kind of work on the ground and really connect in at a deep layer with our community.
Well done. Just feels like an amazing mapping of community strengths and energy that helps people themselves in that community as well as funders connect. So yeah, very exciting to learn more about it. Thank you.
I'm going to turn, is it okay, Renee, just looking at our time, Bruce, and then we have a question from Richard, and then maybe we'll move on to the second half.
Great.
Okay, hopefully a quick one, but I hate to say this, but I'm an accountant, and I apologize if I missed something before, but that 3 1/3 million that people have put into things and recorded, and the 250,000, are they the same currency? Because the big question for me is, are you giving money at all for time or just for resources? And it actually leads into Matthias's question in the chat, because it seems to me there's quite a difference between reimbursing people for time and helping them with their their hire of halls or their seedlings or fence posts and so on and so forth. So are those two recordings the same, and what do you fund?
Yeah, that's a great question, and the answer in our current iteration, which we kind of stood up in a bit of a flash, and we're just a year on, so things will evolve, and we'll get into kind of the deeper understanding of how it has to work for tax and all of that as we go. But we've been doing both. So both time, where people have allocated time and then they've put a value on that time. We've indicated things like to look at the living wage if they are uncertain about how to value their time. But also if people have, say, from our water storage funding pool, people have installed tanks, and so we've paid for items in that way as well.
So just confirming, both time and resources on both sides of the equation.
Yes.
Thanks very much.
Right.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Matthias, you've got a question about accessing funds before action. Do you want to talk to that, or shall we just read it in the chat? Is it possible or envisaged for work teams to access funds before the action begins, e.g. buying fence posts, tools, seedlings, or whatever?
Yeah, this is a great question, because this is something that our community really started asking, can it be used for this purpose? Because in the early days, it was just reimbursement for actions already taken and proof of that. What we envisage going into the future, in the second half of the webinar that I'll get to next, points to how that will work, is actually being able to resource ahead of action, because it's still, some actions can't be taken until you have the resource. And yeah, we really acknowledge that. The first part of where we've gone toward that is to have those future projects started to be listed so that people can use that map to bring funding into them. At the moment, that doesn't exist through the way that we fund on the exchange, but it is about to. So in the second half of this year, we hope to have our first pilot projects rolling that will show pre-funding in the way that you've described.
Wonderful. Richard, do you want to ask your question, or it's really a comment, a suggestion that you get some climate adaptation funding and you start sowing some seeds with MFE or the minister?
Yes, thank you, Trish. It occurred to me that this Cyclone Gabrielle was perhaps the first major event that can be clearly attributed to a changing climate, atmospheric rivers and so on, though there are other factors at stake as well. Some of the management's to do with forestry and so on, but I'm talking about the event itself. Given that, it's sort of a test case for the government. And I think this should be on the government's books as a methodology. I think it's a very important methodology because it doesn't rely entirely on civil defence, for example, organising things. It relies on local initiatives, bringing in volunteers, which is less costly for the government and it gets engagement of the community. So I'm wondering, Renee, thank you very much for explaining this. Have you taken it to the Minister for the Environment or the Minister for Climate Change and said, look, this is what we're doing? I think it should be in the government's mind somewhere, if the government has a mind anyway.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. That's great kind of reinforcement for us as well. We, as the Toha team, we've been having conversations with various sectors of the government throughout our kind of journey in the climate space. So they're definitely aware and involved in conversations at that level. And then with the East Coast Exchange, I think there is a growing awareness, but one of the key pieces that really helped us in that was that the ministerial inquiry into land use out here named the East Coast Exchange and Toha as a recommendation, as one of the recommendations for government to partner with us, particularly in the Māori land space, to show how our system might be able to facilitate a co-investment model. So private and public funds going towards projects through the system, and then the payments going all the way to the front line to get that work done, which I'll talk to in the next part as well. So yeah, we're on the radar, but you know, like it's always good to have more on the radar in the government space and more kind of speed there as well. And I am excited to say that the first, I guess it's not, we haven't got our contracts yet, but there was confirmation that one of the government agencies is going to come to the party for one of the first projects that of our first two projects. And this is hot off the press, so I hope I'm not talking out of turn, but I think I've told all the relevant parties that, yeah, that's just today that we got notification that there will be some government funds coming in alongside the corporate funds that we've been seeking for our pilot projects.
That's wonderful, thank you. And of course, there's the media. I think this needs to get in the media as well, and there are lots of ways of doing that. Yeah,
great. And we're open to all connections and kind of pathways there if anyone would like to support in that way to make connections for us.
Renee,
we're a small team.
Renee, this seems like a really good point to
yes.
into the, what are the new projects that are emerging, or the evolution really, rather than of the platform. Take us there.
I'll take you there to the kind of evolution this year, based on the fact that we know, you know, the amount of funds that we can get in the previous way we've been doing it is never going to be enough for the amount of action that needs to be taken and is waiting to be taken out here and in many communities. So I guess I first wanted to acknowledge that this platform exists as part of a regional ecosystem and a global network where we've got the communities who are taking action, climate positive action, action for nature, those parts of the ecosystem who need trusted data about environmental activity, whether they are our government bodies or industries or supply chain who want to be able to trace products back. There's all sorts of needs for trusted data about environmental activities, especially in supply chain phase. And then the other space it interacts with is, you know, funders, philanthropic groups, government funders, impact investors who want to get resource directly to the front line and know that their dollar is making a difference. So the other piece before I go into this next section that we've grounded ourselves in after being in existence for a year is that the mindset that we bring to this work is that there is abundance, just like in nature, there's abundance for this type of contribution. We want to ensure that we continue to always be transparent with all the resources. That's one of our kind of PO that we stand by, as you can see the platform itself is trying to be really transparent, and we want to continue to do that in all of our operations as well. We trust in our community, and that's why kind of this a regional example of this, and then how it might appear in other communities is really important. We trust that our community itself knows the answers or can access the answers when there's tools and resources around them. And we're really designing this for self-determination. So we want the platform to be owned by community, to have community distributed governance over it, and to be self-determining in that the priorities of the communities themselves and the people themselves in the region can always be reflected in the design of the platform. And so in this next phase, we're launching our first mahi fundraising campaign. This is where it gets a little bit technical, because mahi is a product of the toha system. It's a new product. This is the first kind of mahi sale. And what we're doing here is we're saying, if you put your investment dollars in return, you get a mahi unit. At some later date in the future, once the toha network is up and buzzing and it has all sorts of data contracts going on where people are needing to pay to access data, never own it, because we've got strong feelings around data sovereignty and Indigenous data sovereignty, but get access to data so that their funds flow all the way to the frontline, that this mahi unit that you get when you put your funds in to this fundraising campaign, you can swap those out for toha data credits. And the only way to access data in the toha system is through toha data credits. So we imagine that over time, that will grow in value, and therefore those who invest via this mahi system will be able to get a return based on the growth and the value of the market as a whole. And so that's kind of a whole webinar in itself to talk around that dual token design. And I'm not the best person for it. It's the Toha team and probably Natalie Whitaker, who's our CEO, that can talk really well to all of the complexities in there. But essentially, we are enabling the funds to come forward so that they can reach projects and enable the projects. And then those projects themselves can start to collect data that will then bring them additional value streams. One of the things that we know is that there is some limitations and brokenness in some of our current systems that do that kind of thing on a singular level. So, for example, in Tairāwhiti in the carbon market space, because of the incentive driving our monoculture plantations, there's been like a really strong incentive to plant where there might not necessarily be the best practices in place or that be the right kind of landscape to be planting on. And what we really don't want to do in Toha's nature market is repeat any of those mistakes. So we've been really careful, 5 years R&D, to make sure we're designing in a way that can cater for complexities, can be specific to land type and land use, and can unlock things like our biodiversity data markets, and also acknowledge kind of Indigenous data rights and ensure that where data is monetized in a market sense, that there's always a return that flows all the way back to the originator and the owner of that data. So the way that it's going to work in the East Coast Exchange is that we're going to launch 2 pilots. So this is a screenshot from the Toha website. Just on the left here with the pink little arrows, that's my dad in our Ngā Whenua Rahui block, one of my fave places to go, where we're hoping to use as a seed bank and increase the biodiversity there. So this is our first project, our first mahi sale that we use Toha's data credit system to generate some funds, where we want to prove that enhancing Indigenous biodiversity can be an investable thing. So that's at Te Kautuku, which you saw in my first slide. It's our whenua Māori block, because if you're going to go and try and pilot something on a whenua Māori block, you've you've got to start with your own and put everything you can into it. So you're not only accountable to those people who are engaging with your project, but all of your ancestors and all of your mokopuna for future as well. And this is the type of project that is happening, projects that are happening at Te Kautuku that we're raising for. The value estimates here are not just to cover the activities, but they're to cover the activities, the development of templates and methodologies, particularly for those pieces of whenua and places like it, and to develop the templates that will hold the data that's needed to go up into the nature data market that can then be monetized for Te Kautuku itself. So the prices here on each of the projects also incorporate the costs of the tech and the development of the system. So they're kind of quite chunky in terms of price tag, but we hope that over time, the more pilots we run, the more of that system will be built, and kind of the less heavy at the front end these projects will be. So yeah, it's really exciting. The type of thing that we're going to see there is natural habitat regeneration, native nursery establishment, waterway restoration. Yeah, all of these great things. And the choice of these projects has been done not in consultation, but has been selected by the whānau and management and the trustees of that Māori land block. And why it's important for our Māori land block to be the first, or one of the first pilots, is because the borrowing system against collectively owned land, there's some really different dynamics, I suppose, versus privately owned land. So where you've got multiple ownership and you've got trusts making decisions, and you've got no equity because that land can't be sold, it traditionally is really hard to get to borrow against that. And so we're hoping that this system and the data being an asset can enable more Māori land blocks to get access to the resources that they want and need to carry out their projects. And the second pilot that we'll run this year is on a sheep and beef station out of Matawai, Kōtari Station, with Henry and Sophia Gaddam. They've been working with us, alongside us, and since the beginning of our time as toha in Tairāwhiti as well. These guys are doing amazing things for the biodiversity on their sheep and beef station, and their supply chains are really interested in the data that they can capture that proves that the product that they're selling into market has come from a place where nature isn't being destroyed, or that where the biodiversity is being enhanced. And so they've got a whole range of projects that they are looking to get resourced as well, and templates to build. Those templates will likely be similar but different from our Māori land block templates, but that's the type of complexity that we've built into the toha system to allow that those differences to happen. And yeah, I guess as a final point, and I'll take some questions again if we've got a little bit of time left. These are the ways, I suppose, of interacting with the East Coast Exchange. If you're in region or taking action in region, you can record your action, of course, and you can record your future projects. The more future projects we have in our pipeline, the more kind of large funds, especially when we're talking international, can see us, because they don't get out of bed for small amounts of money, but collectively we can draw those down. If you're in the funding space and you want to see your funds distributed to the frontline communities, those can be distributed and tagged and selected in all the ways that I've described. Impact investors can sign up to the Mahi pre-sale list. So at the moment we're doing closed sales to some partners, including our government partners and big industry partners. But we do intend to have a public offering of that Mahi unit, so that as many people as possible, especially across our region, or people who really want to see the platform exist, can be part of that journey. And yeah, we've just this morning, actually, it's all really fresh, just this morning we've got our first investment memorandum up, first version of that. So there's an opportunity to sign up to receive updates in that space as well, if that's the kind of thing you're interested in, kind of understanding the deeper technicalities of the system. And And aside from that, like we talked about before, yeah, if it is something that you want to explore for your region, or if you want to look at how the toha platform might kind of, you might engage with that, then reach out to me. I'm just at the other end of an email address. And yeah, I'm happy to kind of refer you on to those in the team, and the toha team, who might be able to help or answer any questions. And any other questions that have popped up in that quick run through, I'm happy to answer as well. Thanks, Trish.
Thanks, Renee. I think you might be blowing our minds with with possibility here. But let's have any hands up or in chat. While people are thinking, I've got one that's a more it's more about how you've noticed over this year, and as you develop these new projects, how have you seen people or hapu or organisations, how have you seen them change by being involved in any way, in terms of their commitment to climate action, or just the way they have changed? And this
Yeah.
is a long shot.
Yeah,
Not necessarily verified.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good question, and I suppose it's hard to know what you can attribute change to. But I can say, you know, from what I've noticed since Cyclone Gabrielle, there has been a shift in mindset around climate action, in the circles that I've kind of run in and spaces I've seen. And I think, like, until things impact you directly, there's a sense of, you know, things are happening out there, or it's not really going to affect me. But once, as a whole community, you're kind of every person is directly impacted, there is a growing awareness. Whether that actually translates to taking action or not is, you know, another thing. And I think there's all sorts of kind of compounding factors that might be causing us to take more action, but there's definitely awareness, and the conversation that we're having as a region in our kind of regional strategy spaces and things like that acknowledges that we need to reconsider the ways that we're currently living. You know, like, that's probably the biggie, that whether we're talking about land use or waste or decarbonisation or whatever, that there's an acknowledgement that change is needed.
So you notice the conversation growing and changing, and
yeah. And I mean, like, part of like a sister project, I suppose, that developed alongside the East Coast Exchange was something called the Exchange Cafe. And so Exchange Cafe, that's recordings of climate solution-based conversations, events. And I think maybe 2 or 3 years ago, we would have been scraping to put together a few recordings, but they're constant now, you know, and each of the events that we have in region, there's always a part of that kind of comes back to our climate action decisions. So there's a whole lot of content and fodder that the Exchange Cafe is able to pick up and have discussions around and form solutions from that. Probably a few years back, it wasn't so much a thing out here anyway. Yeah.
Wonderful. Alex, you've got an interesting question there in chat. Do you want to bring that forward?
Unmute, Alex.
No.
Well, I can just read it out.
Maybe I can
Kia ora. Sorry about that. I just needed to find video and and
There you
unmute
are.
myself.
Great.
Tēnā rawa atu koe, Renee. That's just been awesome. My question was really about less about funding and more about skills volunteering, and whether skills volunteering from outside the region is desirable or of any use to your team, or whether you're trying to hold that mahi quite reasonably for people within the region.
At the moment, we, like resources are quite tight, and so we're very open to receiving any support and help. Our intention is really to operate as a network. So, like anywhere where there's things that others can support with, that's part of the design, and that would be amazing, both from inside and outside of region. So one of the things, for example, that we've done in that space is because the region is really interested in its biodiversity, we've set up a biodiversity mission where partners who might be able to offer skills in from across the country have pledged to us that they're available to support. Some need resource to do that, others are just offering their time voluntarily. And so the same goes for any kind of technical support, that skill space. I'd love to explore that further if you think there's some opportunities there. And we also, in response to this type of offering, which is so awesome and generous, we set up a category in the East Coast Exchange where you can put in your support to the East Coast Exchange as an action as well, to support the system, to support the system. So that we're open to all conversations around that. So thanks for asking that question, Alex.
Okay, that's brilliant. I will try and be in touch separately then around that. One thing, one reason I'm asking is that I'm a PI on a Centre of Research Excellence called Te Pūnaha Matatini, which is have you heard of Te Pūnaha
Yes,
Matatini?
I
wondered whether actually you might have already got links to Te Pūnaha Matatini.
Oh, we have and that Mike, who's one of the directors. He has he got a bit of a crew together who have come out and done a visit to the region, not directly through the East Coast Exchange, but I'm involved in the group that's
awesome,
that Mike brought out, and we're really grateful to receive that kind of contribution from external as well. So it'd be great to connect.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Alex.
Getting some lovely comments about disseminating the model, telling others, like prime movers and BOP, which I'm sure you've also had connections with because they're neighbours.
We're really keen to make sure we share that out. Our only limitation is just kind of incapacity to do so, but we will get better and get some resources as well around sharing out our learnings as we go. We've been working quite closely with the Hawke's Bay Sustainable Hawke's Bay, is what they're called. They've recently changed their name from the Enviro hubs down there as well, and really keen to disseminate the model out.
I'm going to ask for the last question.
There's a question from Lala in here.
Can you see one? I'm not seeing. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's how the admin team is being funded. That's a great question. Do you want to talk to that, Lala, or do you want me to? Yeah, so in terms of how, because as I said before, in the current setup, all of the funds, 100% of the funds come in and they go out. So our initial operational model was supported by the Toha network into existence. And so the Toha team supported us to stand up the East Coast Exchange, run its operations as its first example of a regional platform, regional venture. But just this year, we have established East Coast Exchange as its own entity, and we're currently seeking partnership with our regional partners to get investment in to cover our operations and the continued establishment of the ECX, separate to the mahi sale that will support the pilots. And at the moment, yeah, we're making some asks of regional partners to come in receipt of future equity in the ECX. So as I said, we intend for it to be owned by the community itself. And so the current team officially is only myself as the single employee at the moment of the East Coast Exchange, but we're supported by Toha Network, and our fundraising efforts will go to support the administration, the operations of the platform going further. But there is a sustainable business model using Toha technology that enables like a small percentage of each of the transactions to feed the system itself. So we will eventually have our own sustainable business model.
Thanks. Renee, is there a couple of messages or thoughts that you've got about the future and about the big new evolution that you just want people to go away with?
Yeah, I guess the big kind of take-home message for me in this space is how much something like the East Coast Exchange provides hope for our communities in a time where there's so much uncertainty and there's pressure and there's, financial burden and extreme weather events and health and all sorts of kind of things going on for people. The beacons of hope where there's positive activities and positive stories being celebrated is really, really important. We haven't started measuring it yet, but I imagine that kind of well-being results that come through some of these stories is an important part of the puzzle as well. And the other big thing, so there's like the building of hope across the communities, so that we can kind of push forward in tricky times, and there is trickier times coming, as most of us on this call would probably agree with. And then the other thing is just that connection to place is so grounding when we're experiencing these kind of turbulent times as well. So being able to kind of connect into a community and see positive things going on, but also just connect into a physical place, whether it's going to your river or going to a place where there's a bit of forest, or going somewhere where there's nature, is I think a really essential piece of our lives going into the future.
Kia ora, Renee, and as you can see, and you'll see in some of the chat, people are just saying, as I would, how inspiring and grateful we are to the good work that it's just a year, and all the pressure that Cyclone Gabrielle gave to that region, what you've been able to create through that is truly, it's pretty extraordinary. And I know it wasn't from base zero entirely, but kia ora rawa atu, Renee, superb.
Well, I'm reading through messages, and thanks everyone for your kind words. Yeah, it's really encouraging.
Can I just ask everybody, if you're on the video, or you can do it on chat, paki Renee, and for the East Coast, Jay.
Nice.
Yay. Yeah, go really well with these next stages, and it's been really important to hear from you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. Thanks, everybody, and have a good night. And here's hoping that the weather events in the south and the west aren't too serious
Yeah, thoughts for them.
tonight.
And thanks from OCD to Trish and to Renee. Indeed, such wonderful information, so complex and mind-blowing to such good purposes. So thank you for your time and your energies. Kia ora, good night.
Yeah. Good night, everybody.
Māori.
Māori.